a few weeks actually. So it's in a converted garage, and it's not very converted.
So one of the questions we have, so we're also, me and Mike talked to Shannon the other day about how we're capturing people, as we move forward. It's what I thought would be a good way is like, we can bring people into when we go live has been a question. And so our question that we all, are thinking about this week is this a good time to kind of share it to the world, or are we, because we haven't really set up our communication systems yet. So we could record this and still get everyone informed just as good without any problems, and we could also invite people in if you're just presenting, they're listening, no harm, no foul, and just make sure that they go through the proper channels. But yes, if we do have a question and answer round, which I'm sure we will, we'll probably be getting a lot of questions that are going to be distractions if there's people that don't really know what's going on. So it's up to you, Mike. It's you're the facilitator on the call, and it's your presentation. So you just make the call. Either way, I think will work. And we can't go live anyway, but we can invite people on if you want, or we can just keep it here. You choose.
I'd invite them on if they're there and waiting. Then by all means, let them come in, because they'll get a standalone presentation and discussion. With regards to, is it time to go live with the other stuff? I really think that the best way of calibrating that is to ask the team and get their perspectives and say, what do you think about where we are, and does it make sense? And even get some new people to look at that as well, because the fresh eyes are often really, really useful. We can get so engrossed in something that we think, okay, I've touched all the bases or the most important ones, and then you get some great questions coming in. And my feeling is that this particular time is one to try and crystallize, clarify, and ground as many things as possible, as quickly as possible. Get the basics right. We can always get more elaborate later on. But we need a calibration on that from the kind of people who are going to come in from outside and go, okay, what's this all about? And that's the way I tend to do it, is I have my own sort of intuition about things, but I also want a calibration from other people, different people, new people, and to see what they think of it, because that might lead to a little bit more prep work being done. And my feeling is that nothing needs to be absolutely perfect, but we need to get something that people feel is really pretty good to begin with, that gives them confidence. There's another risk there of taking energy out of things if people perceive drift and lack of direction to the energy, I think. How does that sound, Josh? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds good enough for me, good enough for now. And then we'll just make sure that any proper channels anyone has to go into, that's just my overview, my site, my job. So I think we're great. Let's head forward.
Cool, Josh. Has the link been posted? And do you think this is all the people that we've got for this week?
I think it's been posted, and I think we're on track. It's already being recorded, so we're a full go.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do then is I've got the document open, and I'm going to read from some of it. So I'm going to keep it open while we, while I talk a little bit. And the issue is there that some of it needs to be remembered, and it gives me a good structure to talk to. Although I can talk off the cuff about this kind of stuff, I don't want to miss any important points. So, why have things like co-creation tools? Well, organization is a mess, really. It's disorganized. And if we look at some of the best resourced companies, especially on the planet, then what we see is that they're failing. and they're failing at a very, very fast rate, and much faster than they probably have done in history. The statistics that I got on this showed that in 1937, the S&P 500 companies were lasting on average for 75 years. And that was through the Wall Street crash, the Great Depression, the First World War, all that sort of stuff. And they didn't have the advantages of, everyone having a mobile phone, all the apps, the computer systems, the real-time customer resource management software, etc., etc. So we've got these just phenomenally well-resourced organizations that are now lasting for less than 15 years on average, and it's I think it was less than 12 years in Europe, and this was a few years ago, this research. So the issue to me is not about resourcing. There's something much more profound going on. And I think the more profound is that organization is fundamentally flawed. So there's the commercial take on it. The community take on it is I've lived in a number of communities. I lived in a squat in London for a while. I've visited other communities, and I've just got beneath the surface of them a little bit and seen really some quite serious, very, very serious problems in a lot of them. And using this model, the conscious co-creation tools, gives you some lenses through which to look at organization and to start asking some pretty profound questions. And my feeling is we don't need to create a rocket ship. It'd be great if we do, and I think we've got a much greater chance of doing that if we employ these tools. But if we don't get the basics right, then one of the insights that I've had is that most organizations are actually inverting basic principles of organization. So Lao Tzu said 2,500 years or so ago, be still as a mountain and flow like a great river. And there's an insight brought into this through these tools as well. So what do I mean by that? The first item on the conscious co-creation tools is intention. And I think that consciously, spiritually, everything comes from intention, first of all. That's the great starting point. So an intention in organizational terms needs to be a constant, a guiding star. Ideally, a set of values or a simple statement or two that says, this is what drives us, this is where we're going to, this is everything that we stand for. And so intention's the first thing. The next one is an appropriate structure to bind people together. And the conclusion that I've come to on that is that it needs to be a circle. If we end up with a small group within a community that makes the decisions for the others, then we're recreating the pyramid. And we need to actually invert that. And what I mean by that is that the most important decisions of a community should be made by the community. And this perhaps, when we reflect on things like Swiss democracy, that this might explain why, you haven't been able to drag the Swiss into a war for 150 years or more. And the last time it happened, it was Napoleon invading, which is, pretty long time ago. So 200 years ago, maybe. So the structure is also important, having an appropriate structure for the needs of the organization. And the third thing is a process which actively takes in feedback from ideally everyone that the organization deals with, certainly all of the people within the organization, ideally all the people that the organization interacts with as well. So in the corporate world, that could be, the suppliers and people like that also have an important perspective to bring on an organization. So we've got intention, structure, and process acting as a three-legged stool effectively. And if you get those the right way round, then I think you've got a very good chance of bringing the rest of it together and making an effective organization. So let's just take an analogy here, and the analogy that I use is this: that our ancestors have sailed seas and oceans successfully for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, trading, and mostly very successfully in a very dangerous, unpredictable environment. And how did they do it? One is intention. They agreed where they were going to go together. The second one is they had the right structure to take them there, a ship or a boat. And the third thing is they had a process to allow for the actions of the wind and the waves on the way. And where I think it gets more enlightening is if we then take that very same analogy and apply it to government, to the corporate world and things like that. And what we see is that the intention is not a constant. It tends to be constantly changing short-term exhortations. This month it's sales, next month it's costs, next month it's customer service. And so the focus is constantly shifting. There's no stability, there's no quality, and the values get lost in that process, and everyone becomes hard-bitten and cynical. The structure is a pyramid, and pyramids aggregate the power at the top. They attract the people who are most concerned with power to the top. You get little clusters of highly competitive people who are all concerned about their own power and their own little empires and their own pyramids near the top. And you end up then with division, internal competition, passing the buck instead of trying to do the very best we can and pass a good ball on to the next person in the team. And it attracts psychopaths, and you end up with politics and division and hierarchy and command and control and all the rest of it coming into that kind of structure, because there's no other way for people to deal with the situation than to become part of that system. So structure. It's a real problem. It's Schwartz said structure is everything, and I think he's right in that context. But so is intention, and so is process. So let's look at the process now. The process is typically one in major organisations and governments, etc., of people stepping forward and saying, "Hey, I think we've got a problem here," and immediately they're cut down, shut down, and locked out of the system. Now, those people are very often bringing absolute gold to an organization in terms of this is how we improve. This is how we improve our relationships with each other. This is how we improve our relationships with each other. This is how we improve our relationships with our customers, our suppliers, etc., etc. So, the process is corrupted. It's resistant to feedback. It means that you can't adapt, you can't change. The internal people are treated as problems. The customers are treated like idiots and also as troublemakers. So let's take those lessons and apply them back to the ship analogy. If the intention of the ship is constantly changing, the structure is divisive and political and hierarchical, and the process is resistant to feedback, we'd be crashing into the harbour wall before we even left port. And that's where modern organisation is. So back to Lao Tzu, what we can see is that the elements of organisation at a basic level that are supposed to be fixed and still as a mountain are actually being moved around and mutable. And the elements that are supposed to be flowing and based on feedback are becoming fixed. So we've got an inversion of those principles coming to the fore. So as Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. But that's exactly how most modern organizations work. And there's a real danger of doing something that Deming called mindless copying. We just think we need to do more of it. We just think we need to do it harder. We just need a bigger stick to beat people with. We need bigger bribery for the people at the top, bigger targets, bigger bonuses, and all the rest of it. And while we're talking about targets and push targets and stuff like that for an organization, W. Edwards Deming, who inspired a lot of this and really developed this holistic organizational approach called systems thinking, said there is no point setting targets. The system will deliver what the system will deliver. And how profound is that? If you don't have a stable system, there's no point in setting targets, because you've got no idea what it's going to deliver. And if you do have a stable system, there's still no point in setting targets, because the system is still going to deliver what it's going to deliver. And what's the profound insight underlying that is that, management, or the organizers, the servants of an organization, the leaders of an organization, their focus should be on improving the system itself, instead of setting these arbitrary targets and pushing people harder and harder to achieve them. And if we think about this, we might have a fantastic month in an organization and, hey, sales are up and everyone's standing on their desks and cheering and all the rest of it. It's fantastic. And the next month, sales might be down and everyone's now thoroughly depressed and the management want to change things and sack people and stuff. But what if, because we're part of nature and everything's part of nature and everything in nature works on waves, that's just a sign of a normal fluctuation within a system. So the profound insight underlying that is we need to know what stability is and what the normal boundaries of stability are as well. So, okay, we've covered intention, we've covered process and structure. I'm going to go into them a little bit more deeply later on. But the next three elements that come in as part of our overview are that the intention is next further developed into a more detailed vision. And let's take a community for a second for an example. The vision is really about what are all the most important things to us? What are the most important things that we want to manifest? And so we could be talking about the buildings and the building materials. We could be talking about the food, the water, the waste, the energy, the healthcare, the social facilities, the educational facilities. But those are going to be, the kind of things that are going to spring to mind when we deal with a community. So let's think about the vision. The vision should be in an ideal world, because there's no point in aiming low. If we aim low, we might achieve it. But if we aim really high and we keep evolving as we go, then the chances are we're going to surpass our low target and leave that far behind, just get better and better and better. So the vision items could be something like, when it comes to the water coming back out of our community is cleaner than the water coming into the community. When it comes to the waste, we have zero waste. When it comes to energy, we have our own abundance of energy, which is pure energy and non-polluting. So these are the kind of things that we can bring into the vision items. It could be that we're going to build a straw bale barn and we're going to put aquaponics in it, or hydroponics. We're going to connect that to our own energy, and we're going to grow our own food year in, year out, every single day of the year. And we could even have some slightly heated areas, possibly using things like compost and wood chips, so that we can have our own avocados, fresh avocados in the midst of winter. And one of the interesting things about aquaponics, if I can digress a little bit, is that you typically need around about 5 square meters per person to give you all of your tabletop vegetables for life. And if you think about how the seasons work in most parts of the world, especially places where I'm living, and I've lived as far as Sweden, and I'm now in the UK. The growing season doesn't really start until about April, maybe May. It's all over by September, certainly October. A lot of those times of of the year aren't really optimal anyway. You can have a bad season, you can have too much rain, too little rain, too much sun, too little sun, pests, all the other sorts of issues going along with it. But if you're growing something simple like lettuces, you could have those lights, LED lights, switched on 365 days a year, and you could be producing a crop of lettuce every month. And it could be going 24/7. So, and when you think about that, that's releasing a fantastic amount of land from agriculture back to nature, and it's improving the food quality, and it's improving the local resilience. And if you made 3 times the requirements for each person, then you could be flipping all of the economic outflows from a community into economic inflows, as well as producing great quality crops and absolute freshness for your neighbors living around, etc. So those are the kind of vision items that we're looking at, and now that means that we can evolve off the back of that a simple strategy, and I've just outlined one, which is if we overproduce in food, overproduce in energy, and we consciously do it, and we make at least, say, 3 times the needs of the community, then we're not just building in resilience into the community, we're maybe opening up the possibilities of a gifting economy to local schools, old people's homes, whatever, and maybe also getting into the possibility of being able to sell the surpluses and flipping around so that we're getting additional income coming into the community and moving it consciously into abundance. So there's our strategy. Now we can have a plan, because we know where we're going in terms of, for example, this straw bale barn covered with a geopolymer and growing 365 days a year with its own, energy sources. And now we're able to build a simple plan, which is, okay, what happens first is maybe we need to get something like planning permission. Maybe the next thing is we need to get we get the plans drawn, we go for planning permission, we build the base, blah, blah, blah. It tells us our steps that we need to go through to actually manifest. So we've now got our vision scoping out into a strategy and a plan. And the next stage is what I call the conscious cycle, which is pure Deming. Also, this is not mine, but he suggested we have a little spinning wheel of planning, doing, studying what we do, and acting upon that information. So what he's suggesting is that we actively take in opinion, information, data, feedback, and we incorporate that, and we go, okay, so if we were going to do this again, what would we change? And what would we change, not just about the building of a building, for example, but perhaps the structure of the structure, the organization of the organization, how our team works together, etc. So we're constantly looking to improve what we do all the time. So as a quick summary of where we are, we've now covered the intention, the structure, the process, the vision, a strategy leading to a plan, and then the conscious cycle, so we can constantly improve what we're doing. So before I go on into a little bit more detail on the processes, does anyone have any questions or comments at this point that they'd like to share? If so, please pop your hand up or unmute yourself or whatever.
I do. I would love to from what I have kind of gotten, and I think I even have your co-creation tool pamphlet open. When it comes to the structure and process, like really like understanding, and maybe there's another time for that. Maybe we can give it, maybe, depending on how you want to do this. Maybe you want to just do the whole thing and then do the questions and answers later. But right here it says the 3 elements are intent, process, structure. A flowing process capable of adapting to changing circumstances that enable us to move towards our intent, flexibly evolving while retaining balance, involving everyone as equals. So I'm assuming this is like kind of like the culture code, kind of like a decision-making process. Is that right? Kind of like how we work together day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's both of those things. It is there's an intention behind everything here, and the intention of the process is that they reduce politics and personal conflict. They assist the flow of energy within the group so that it doesn't get dissipated by personal conflicts and things like that. There are in fact two processes that I'm suggesting. One is a fast process so that the energy can flow. Those with intuition, instinct, creativity, vision, experience, practical things to bring to the table can just flow them in as they're needed, and that would flow typically through someone serving the group as a chair to just make sure that everyone gets heard. But there's another process, and the other process is designed. It's a listening circle, which I'm sure probably all of you are familiar with. But the objective there is to go much slower and much deeper and get into how people feel about things, and what are the semantics here? What's the feeling that I get when someone talks about organization or leadership or structure or something like that? What do you mean by that? How does that work? Because my perception is that this is a system, and I know that the system is something that suppresses people and represses individuality, etc. So yeah, that's the process side of it. We'll go into that, Josh. But does that sort of cover it for the moment for you?
Yeah, that sounds good on the process. So that's one of the processes, and so we can go into that later. And then the structure. Do you want to just touch on that really quick? What to you? Let me read from the co-creation actually also on that one. Co-creation says a suitable structure to bridge the conscious intent and the process. So in the terms, I know you went over the structure in a different context, but in the terms of like a structure of, to me, I guess the structure would be for instance, things that are sort of fixed, like you said, like communication channels. I mean, they can change, but they're, you have them set, they're recorded. Money flow, anything that's kind of a structure, it's set up, ahead of time, like master plan, and then, so it's all how we're working together. It's all set up. You can graph it out. You can show people, right? Is that structure what you mean?
Yeah, it can be, but that can also be process. I think we need to look at these conscious co-creation tools as a much more simpler and basic thing, which is how do we get a group of people together whereby we can actually achieve things and we can manifest things without getting into all of the usual sort of side effects of dysfunctional organization. And on that basis, the structure is something that enables us all to be heard. For example, it means that we can all have input into decisions, and yeah, that's where the circle comes in. I'll step through this because I think what I'd like to do is, if I can go deeper into the processes first of all, we can go into the structure next, and I'll sort of elaborate on that if I may. So
Okay, I'm complete. Thanks.
okay, cool. Thanks, Josh. Has anyone else got anything to bring in at this point, or shall I chug on?
Lillian has her hand up.
Millian, hi, Millian.
Hi, that was amazing. I think it's really great, Mike, that you have this kind of download that you can share with us. It's really, really, really enlightening. So I love the idea of the two structures, like one for a deeper dive, one for kind of trying to make decisions faster. And it's like a training ground. So I just wanted to maybe offer a like a slightly different model of looking at structures, because what you said about the two groups really makes a lot of sense to me, but I just wanted to refine the picture a little more. So like, you were talking about pyramids and stuff, and I think that there are going to be people who repeat that pattern sort of because they don't know what else to do. And I think that it's really important to, I see it as like, like plants in a permaculture, right? So there's different roles that each plant and different functions that each plant fulfills. And if you don't have a context that keeps recreating the conditions for certain plants, then they won't come back. Like, you can choose to plant mulch plants that create a lot of healthy fungi in the soil, and that will reduce the amount of weeds that you have, just because weeds are more they're more bacterial based. They get their nutrients more from bacteria than fungi. So when the context that's creating that stuff disappears, then that stuff will also disappear. We have to be really gentle with people, because if they really knew how to do something else, they would be doing it, right? And so I think having a context where we think of it as almost like, think of it as like, you go into a cave in Mexico and there's different crystals, and everyone has their crystal lattice that makes it look unique. It gives it its color and its shape, and it has its own community, but there's many kinds. And that, we have your metaphor of the ship and agreeing what direction to go to is really great. But I think we have to make context for, as you did at the end, different types of people, different personalities, and value them as they're on the journey. Like the destination is an ideal, and then as we get to the destination, people still have to live functionally, right?
Absolutely spot on. And I think this is inbuilt, hardwired into this model about, everyone has different gifts, and it really is a way of making sure that those people are heard, that diversity is valued, that individual talents are able to be gathered together in what I call the collective consciousness, and what someone called Francis Galton called the wisdom of the crowd. And there's some specific sort of conditions that need to be present to enable that to happen. So I think hopefully as I go through, that should become very clear as well. So, but I think everything that you've said is spot on. This is really crucial. Otherwise, we end up with, let's say there is a fantastic leader somewhere. They are someone that, people want to follow because they've got a great vision and a great heart and all the rest of it. And let's say they're very often right. The danger in that position is that, when people like that make mistakes, they tend to make very big mistakes because they're not used to being wrong. And this is where that can get moderated by a group. And in fact, what it does is you think, well, maybe this sucks the leadership out of an organization. No, what it does is it helps to give everyone the unleashing of their own leadership potential and creativity and their particular gifts and knowledge and expertise. So, a very natural one would be, let's talk about the growing on the community. Bang, you're there because you've obviously researched permaculture, you know about permaculture, you've got a passion for it, and by having numbers of people coming together and sharing their knowledge, then they can create a much clearer, bigger, better picture between themselves. And maybe if they don't always agree about everything, then they can actually do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And so, it's not got the exclusivity of, hey, my way or the highway.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I agree. And I think that my experiences have been in just the recent last month, which is why I haven't really been present in the group, was that I was working with people who really were habituated to not get to decide what they thought for themselves. Like they grew up in a cult. And I was like, hey, we're going to have a talking piece and sit in a circle and everyone's going to share. And I actually had one person request that she can respond in writing later. And I was like, no, you cannot respond in writing later. You're a part of the group and we're here for you. If you say something wrong, it's okay. No one's going to attack you. And it was really, really, really exhausting because they were attacking me and fighting me for their right to not be empowered because they're afraid of it. And that's sort of a really upside down world experience where it's like, your voice is important and valuable. And they were like, no, we just want to hate you and stab you in the back when you're not here. Like, you know. I'm like, no, that we're not doing that. That's not okay anymore. Neither one of us gets to do that.
This is all stuff, this is real world stuff that we need to deal with, though, isn't it? Which is, we've all got wounds, we've all had difficult experiences, we've all learned bad habits, we've all got unconscious stuff that's playing along. But hopefully you'll see, the support on the group level and the support on the individual level as well. So let's move on, if I may. And I think,
thanks so much.
My pleasure. If there's anything missing by the end, then, hopefully this will cover it. So what are the processes? Well, Deming, again, provided a really good quote for this, which is, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And this is really profound knowledge because if we have to make it up as we go along, what we end up with is the control freaks and the patriarchs and the people who say, I've got money and I've been successful and I can demonstrate it, and therefore you're just a writer, or you are someone who doesn't dig and you don't garden or whatever, and therefore my contribution is more valuable. And they end up with people stepping into a vacuum. And especially if you don't get this intention, structure and process stuff right, then you've got all sorts of weird effects that come out of it. And by structure, I don't just mean the structure that I'm going to go into, which is the circles and the flower of life and the co-creative structure, but also, what kind of legal entity have you got? Because if you get 20, 30, 40 people coming together to buy, say, a former industrial unit or something like that with, flats attached, and they end up with the bulk of the property effectively owned by a small company with only a small number of people involved, and not everyone's got an equal share, then you've got two possibilities from that. One is that the people who go, oh my goodness, I've just been given this huge property, effectively treat it then as their own and not as a community asset. Or you've got the possibility of those people who have put in the money and don't have the shares to start to project on those people and judge and say, hey, you've stolen our asset, kind of thing. And wherever these things aren't really very, very ideally simple and clear and crystallized and really intentionally co-owned, then you've got all that sort of potential problem to arise. So what are the processes? Well, why do we have the processes, first of all? Well, the processes are intended to produce several outcomes. The first one is wise decisions, decisions that employ the benefit of the collective consciousness, but that don't step on the individual at the same time. They consciously seek to create a balance. And the result of that is to reduce the likelihood of conflict arising in the first place. The third element that we're aiming to produce is the ability to resolve differences, and that means, as Millian's just said, to the ability to bring differences out into the open without fear. Actually, the elimination of fear was one of the things that Deming talked about a lot in organisation. The next one is to support efficient and effective energy flow. Why is that? Because if we've got a group of people co-creating and collaborating, and people spend all day discussing the colour of the front door of the school, and I'm not plucking that example out of thin air, I've heard of that happening, then there's a real risk that that sucks the energy out for everyone else. Hey, I'm not really worried about the colour of the door. And while you two people are having a ding-dong argument about it all day and you can't resolve your differences, then everyone else is losing interest in this. So the final thing is then to support the team field and the intention. So the suggestion, and these are all just suggestions and ways of looking at things, the suggestion is that that's a chaired exercise, and it's used for fast progress. It enables those with energy, knowledge, enthusiasm, expertise, as I said, inspiration, to put forward solutions and improve them rapidly. So, who is the chair? The aim of the chair is that they are what's known as a servant leader. And that means, for example, the chair is probably not going to vote, but their job is to help with the group energy flow, to value people's time, ensure positive progress is made, where possible, suggest bridges and practical compromises, help to retain the group focus, energy, and positive momentum, which we can also call effectiveness, and support the intention and the implementation of the team's processes and agreements. So if they do their job properly as a servant to the group, they'll ensure everyone gets heard. They'll help to keep the focus of the group on positive solutions. They'll keep the team focused on improving the solutions put forward. They'll ensure at the same time that alternative solutions can be put forward. And as part of the bridging process, if necessary, they can suggest that maybe 2 or more options are developed if there are competing solutions. So, if we are united by our intention, and some people want to make a dome and other people want to build a straw bale house, if we have the resources, why not do both? Why not go through the experience of building both and seeing if both of them work fantastically well? Maybe one works a little bit better or a lot better than the other. So the bridging solutions are important, but also the last one is to bypass blocking. Because if we can't articulate better than simply, I don't like it, then anyone who's doing that actually isn't putting anything practical to action on the table. And the problem is that those people who are then putting the positive solutions forward get undermined by that, and it can actually lower the energy of the team. So I don't like it's perfectly valid, but it's not a solution, and it's nothing that we can action unless that person can really say, actually, I think this is better instead. And if you can do that, you might as well put forward that alternative solution or the improvement on the existing solution on the table. So, in summary, the chair serves the group as a facilitator, administrator, leader, meeting flow, stewardship, representation, the custodian of the intention, effectively. And what I'm suggesting is that majority decisions are used and the chair doesn't vote unless the group is split. And if you can just put yourself in the position of someone chairing, then that creates pressure for them. It's an undesirable team situation to have a split, and it really encourages the creativity of the chair to make bridging solutions that more people can buy into. So the energy circle is used for rapid and effective decision making, and if that gets stuck, then we do have another process, which is the listening circle, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But the tradition of this listening circle is that people can talk for as long as they want. It goes round in a strict order. It goes round at least 3 times. And if that gets stuck, then you can always sleep on it and come back to it overnight. And it's really important. We've got a lot of people who've had a lot of damage in life. They need to be heard. If there's emotional triggering going on, we need to get to the root of, is that a semantic issue? Is that just we've got different views on what a word means or something like that? How does it make me feel? So the aim is that at that stage we slow things down, and we really aim to go deeper with people and give people the confidence to be able to speak from the heart and say, that really concerns me. And sometimes there's something, very, very valuable to come from that as well, not just on an individual basis, but on a group basis as well. So the aim is to come out with more clarity and more depth. So underpinning this is some team agreements that are fitting and serve the team and its intention, because it's unfortunate, but with the kind of toxic environment that we've all been used to, then there are issues of ego, personal conflict, different values, and even conflicts between our values that we need to try and reconcile. So the basic team agreements are things like the Toltec principles. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. Be skeptical, but learn to listen. And there's one that I've added on there, which is quite simply take responsibility for supporting the team, its processes, and its intention, which we have all mutually agreed. So one of the principles here is that if we don't like it, we don't like the structure, we don't like the processes, etc., then we can always put forward a replacement or an improvement. We all have responsibility to do that, but once we've agreed them, then we abide by them. So the agreements can be things like we input positively in order to avoid negative blocking of the team and its intention. Work should be prepared in advance for team meetings. Otherwise, it can waste time for everyone. If we're playing catch up on the fly and pitching in questions, if we haven't looked at a document which everyone else has read, for example. We should commit to meeting deadlines and act promptly in response to team requests. Otherwise, if it all depends on us in that moment, then I could be the one who's causing the drag factor that everyone else is waiting for. So, and that also brings discernment. Discernment is, can I do it? And can I do it in that time? And yeah, if I'm going to lift it, then I'll lift it and I'll do it for the team. So we've discussed I don't like it, which can take, various forms. But the aim is that, we need something that's actionable to be brought to the team. And being united by our intention, we're prepared to support the decisions of the majority. And there's a real important element behind this, which is that, a lot of people talk about consensus, and that being used by tribes. And in fact, it can be very, very successful, but there are not always accurate perceptions of consensus. So consensus really typically is most effective in very long established, very close communities, religious communities, communities like tribes that have, had generations of working together. But even the tribes have mechanisms to deal with people who are mentally unbalanced, who are on drugs or alcohol, people who are having a little private war between themselves and stuff like that, and very often they're put into exclusion until they've sorted themselves out. So consensus is something very, very difficult to implement when we've come from such a toxic environment and there is so much experience of bad organization, politics, ego, etc. And the aim is to have a deep understanding here that, anyone can have a bad day. But even if it's the chair who's having a bad day, everyone else is going to moderate them and go, no, that's not, Just chill out, relax. It doesn't happen that way here. Let's take 5 minutes break. So we've covered I don't like it and supporting the decisions of the majority. And we can also delegate or abrogate our decision-making responsibility if we don't input into the process in a timely manner. And that means if I've got other things to do, then I've got to trust everyone else to get on with it. If I've got a real problem with it, then I can come back and I can say, hey, I think, I'd like to suggest that we change this a little bit, or we do this instead or something, and just put it back to the team. But otherwise, if work is delegated to a team, planning, organization, food, whatever, we let them get on with it. So the members take responsibility for implementing their own rules and processes, and support the chair in implementing them accurately and equitably. And we also take responsibility for our own actions, our own team contribution, and our emotional responses. Our own emotional responses need to be something that we try and own. And so those are quite basic, really, but the intention is if they're implemented, it will go a long way to removing politics and ego and positively support the work being offered to the group. So in terms of formats, what do we do when we get a solution put forward? We can agree it. We can put forward a better alternative. We can put forward an improvement to the existing alternative. We also need to consider about dealing with blockages and conflict and non-violent communication, etc. But those are more sort of administrative details, which I'm going to skip over now. But those are the suggestions for the processes for the group. And we're going to get into structure next. But just before we go into structure, does anyone have any, questions about what I've covered on the processes so far? Yes, Josh.
Not as much of a question. I just want to set a little bit of context. I've written down a lot of things that, as I'm seeing the process go here, just to let everyone know, me and Mike talked, this last week, and we kind of decided we'll unroll the co-creation process, which is a complete system, and then I'll be unrolling New Earth organizational structure, which is a complete system. And as I see different things that are almost everything, Mike, just to be honest with you, is complementary. And I think that there's pieces that we're both going to be able to add to this, and we're going to be able to come up with a system and just using what we've already developed, even when it comes to this proposal process. Like anything I bring to you, Mike, obviously is going to be in a full proposal. And we can discuss how that might look to create a third solution if there's still incompleteness, if there's still, masterminding to be done. So although I do have different points, I'm feeling to save those, let you go through the full process, and then and I guess there's a question in here, which is, do you see it like where we unroll both of our processes in full, and then have that opportunity to allow everyone to kind of take a piece of it, set a proposal that could fit into the roadmap, and then we can, since we have the roadmap, me and you, we can plug that in and kind of have either one big option or a couple variations depending on. Is that how you see it, Mike?
My temptation is always to trust the team, Josh, and what I would suggest is that whatever we come out with should be ideally, one document, and every document should stand on its own 2 feet, and there should be different parts covering different things, and it should be as simple and clear as possible, so we don't have a lot of bureaucratic or administrative stuff to try and remember when we're trying to contribute to the group. And it's also, we want to avoid intimidating people as well. But my temptation would always be to say, okay, Is there a preference? Does this document just make another part of the other document? Should it be inserted into a certain place? Does anything need to be changed? Does it all make sense? And has anyone got any suggestions for improvement? And go straight with the collective consciousness and trust. Because the best way of establishing trust is to give the trust, actually. Yeah.
Okay, then I've got something for you.
Okay.
Okay. So on the process specifically, so there is a decision model which I believe might be its own whole call because it is very complex. But so you have voting, and then we have a different model that we've come up with that we can go through. When I can prepare that and we can talk about it together. But part of this model is not even about decision resolution methodology. It's about decision iteration. So it's how we discuss. It's what you're talking about. It's how we talk, and it's how we. And so what we have is what's called a culture code, which is what's been developed. So how that would look. So kind of where you said that you said that if there's a process, if you can't explain the process, then you don't know what you're doing. Right? Right. Okay.
Yeah, that was Deming. Yeah. And the problem is people tend to invent it and just copy what they've seen, which is, the one who shouts loudest kind of territory very often goes along with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how I see this is, a process, like we said, it adapts, it changes. It could even possibly it could even possibly change on a call as we speak. We go, oh, that's a great idea. We all go, let's try that. But if other people aren't on the call, then we have to inform them. Then if they show up to our call, then there's a confusion in the process. Then we're coming from different contexts. Then we have to figure out what the problem is. So Culture Code takes care of that in the fact that each little individual team that's working together has established their processes, this being a good example of one solid process, the co-creation model, which has embedded in it the listening circle and the energy circle. So that's being, one of them. As we develop this, each team might have big keys and big awesome pieces to this, and so they may create their own little way of interacting together, and then we may create our own. And so how we had it before is, well, if someone runs into a problem, they talk to another team. But how I'm seeing it now as we kind of co-create this is maybe there's actually even more live feedbacks, so that we don't have to necessarily catch everyone up on everything we're doing all the time. But at the same time, they have an opportunity to learn so that we avoid a lot of those miscommunications. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I think, I think we need to sort of differentiate between a general situation and a special situation. So a general situation could be, hey, our group has found that we encountered a problem when we were employing this process, or this structure didn't serve us well, or something like that. And a general one is then, we think this would improve things for everybody if we all took a look at this and maybe discussed it and decided to adopt it. A special situation is, for example, there was a fire, and someone took control and started shouting, you get on the phone, you run and get the fire hose, you get the children out, etc. That's a special situation because suddenly, there's something very, very different going on. It's a bit of a wild example, but I think it's a valid one. So bringing our discernment to special situations and general situations, I think, is quite important. And yeah, it could be that there's a little subgroup and they're dealing with something in a particular way, and you know what? If it works for them, then great. But it may not translate into working for everybody. And I think part of the intention of the conscious co-creation tools is to view all this stuff. Excuse me a second.
Sure.
As tools. Why? Here's my best example. It works brilliantly.
I love this one.
It serves its purpose perfectly, but it doesn't screw screws. It doesn't hammer nails, and it doesn't even work so good upside down, because it doesn't fulfill its purpose of holding the liquid instead of spilling it all over me. So bringing our consciousness to the tools themselves means that we are now in a much more powerful position to say, hey, this is no longer working. We need to improve the process, or we need to change the structure, or something like that. And everyone can now go, how would that work? Would that be flipping it upside down? So it's trying to bring all of these issues to the consciousness, and especially how very, very dysfunctional most of the world is, organizationally and governmentally, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. I see the decision resolution methodology when it comes to our processes and the culture we're building, because it is an experiment and it's just it's just the way that we're deciding to kind of run a meeting, let's just say, or for example, or whether it's a town. In this case, I'm going to speak on town hall meetings because we've already discussed, if you're a specialized group and you want to interact however you want, that's your business. So we're kind of saying that there needs to be also a general language. Let's say this is part of our language building because it's the process that we're using to speak, which supports us understanding each other, which is part of our language. So how I see it is these little groups are making their experiments and they add to this process, and they make some very valid points that somehow is proven to be like much more efficient and better. Maybe the collective could somehow adopt that and go, yeah, let's, so many groups have adopted it. Like there's a sharing mechanism, and so many groups have adopted that new tool. They've adopted this new tool, like the cup, or maybe it's something else, right? A thermos. And after a while, it's like, hey, this is becoming a common language. It's a culture. It's the culture code. It's like saying this is becoming a common language. This is actually something to look at. It's working for all the teams. Let's look at adopting it into the main communication level, the town hall meetings, whatever you want to call it, the co-creation process, the main co-creation process.
Yeah, that's evolution. But the part of the intention here is that actually, if we are creating an organization that acts like an organism, it should have the ability to be conscious, to adapt, to react, to forecast, but also ideally to work in exactly the way that nature works, which is to retain its balance while constantly evolving all of the time. So the aim is to have our constants pinned down, which is our values, and our evolution flowing. So that's the intention behind this, I think.
I think the best way to find balance, what I've found, just as we're going over this point of the process, is it's kind of like there's three of us and we're holding hands, skipping or whatever. We're kind of doing it together, right? And so there's a communication line. In this case, it's a physical, it's visual, sound, it's everything. But if someone just turns right around and jerks everyone backwards, obviously they're going to fall off balance because the other people didn't know in time. They didn't have that communication. They weren't aware of it. So I think that going slow enough to where the whole group understands that there's going to be a shift, especially if it's a global shift. if it's in the global field, that it doesn't change every moment, that there is a pretty solid thing. And if something does get adopted, it's just it's a slower than the micro, like ourselves, we could change every day. Our small group, we could change pretty often, but the global, we want to, we want to, you know, take a good amount so everyone has a time to kind of catch up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and another principle here is that, you know, it really, if someone is completely out of balance and, you know, letting their ego run away, and it could be something simple like, you know, I've got experience in this. Well, you know, there's a difference between experience and good experience, or you know, when you know most of the practices organizationally are bad practices, which work against nature and against human nature, then, you know, someone coming in saying, well, I saw, you know, them doing this way on, you know, what, such and such a TV program, or that's the way the news describes it, and, you know, they're all Machiavellian at the top and self-interest and stuff, so we need to be as well. Then people can get really stuck on that kind of stuff, and the aim is actually that unless that's a positive, you know, suggestion that the group can adopt, that the group itself can just flow around that person having their, you know, a bad day, and on that basis they can, you know, choose to step out of the group. They can choose to shift. As I explained in the last call, there was an international quality group that I chaired where an organization sent in 3 representatives trying to embed their commercial agenda into a multi-industry quality exercise. And once they realized that actually they'd have to send a heck of a lot more people to be the majority on the group, the interesting thing that happened was that they didn't stop coming actually, but they dropped their agenda, and that they decided that they'd put their immediate short-term corporate interests to one side and just contribute wholeheartedly to the exercise itself, because it would be actually beneficial for their company. They wouldn't get their little sort of sales thing put in there, or their marketing or whatever, but, you know, there was still benefit to be gained. So on that basis, you know, it could also isolate infiltration, in inverted commas, as well as someone having a bad day. But there's more to that in terms of, you know, the intention is that if someone is having a bad day, or 2 people are having an argument, then you can have someone who's like a imago relationship counselor to talk to both of the people individually, see if they can open their hearts to each other, see if they can come to a deeper understanding, and if they're still going at it hammer and tongs, then maybe take it back to the group and get the group to decide, because, you know, if people get in their ego like that, then it can send a whole, you know, it can certainly detract from the intention of the whole exercise. So, you know, then there's another balance to be struck, which is, what about the other 20, 30, 40 people in this organization? You know, they don't need to listen to people bitching at each other all day.
Yeah, stagnant progress. I think that a lot of those come in the decision iteration. So it comes when you're trying to make a decision together versus, you know, just chit-chatting. You know, some people might think that they're making a decision together. Anyhow, I'm complete.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, thank you. If anyone else has anything that they want to pitch in at this stage, then please do so. And if not, I'll just go into the structure side of it. So, okay, no hands going up at the present time. So structure. The first one I've touched on already, which is corpus structures. You know, what's the vehicle? A company, a foundation, a trust. Again, we need to bring some consciousness to that. What are we trying to achieve? And what I'm suggesting is that we view these as organs of a body, perhaps, and put maybe more than one together. How do the rich and famous protect their assets? They have trusts. If we want to do a community organization to do operations, though, then, you know, maybe we should be looking at a cooperative. And if that's the case, then we be wise to put the assets of the cooperative in the cooperative? Would it be wiser to put the assets of the cooperative into a trust and have the cooperative doing the operations, so that if there's some kind of a problem with the operations themselves, the people aren't going to lose their land, their houses, etc. So all I'm suggesting there is, let's be aware of what the possibilities are, and that we don't necessarily need to do one if we have two very important things that we want to achieve at the same time. So, what are all the different attributes of different kinds of organizations? And then the next one is more important, arguably, which is human organizational structures. What does our organization that involves everyone look like? It's a circle. That circle can be, the whole world. It could be a little group who are planning to start a community or live in a village or something like that. But even in relatively small organizations, what you'll typically get is those people who are interested in strategy, planning, organization, things like that. It's not necessarily going to suit everybody. How does that manifest? Well, visually, what we've got now is a circle within a circle. Now that's going to manifest hierarchy again if those small group of people are making the decisions on behalf of everyone else and telling everyone else what to do. What if we consciously reverse that? And what if that little group makes now recommendations with their plans and their models, etc., that go out to the wider group? And the wider group now asks questions, improve things, the community decides the most important things, and that now goes back into the middle for implementation. Well, what we've created in that energy flow is the most fundamental flow of energy in nature, which is the toroid. So let's look at things going back to the vision points that we raised earlier on. You've now got a little group who are looking at things like strategy, planning, organization, etc. But you might have other people or an overlap dealing with food, water, waste, energy, healthcare, building materials, social facilities, education, etc. Visually, what we're building now is the flower of life. And the intention is, again, that all of that information flows out from these people who are passionate about the food growing or the waste or the water or whatever, do their research, do their planning, and now that goes back out to the wider group as well. So what happens when we get to an even bigger group? What happens, what's the sort of reasonable physical limit for a circle? My thinking is that, ideally you don't want to get much beyond about 12. So what happens when you start to get more people? What I'd suggest is that, quite simply, the circle splits off and we end up with more and more circles coming together, and those people elect their own chair to serve the group and do the energy flow and to represent the wishes of the group at the next level. And the inspiration for this is W.L. Gore, who have self-organizing teams and make Gore-Tex clothing and have been one of the top 10 manufacturers in the United States for decades. So it might sound a bit wild and wacky, but hey, it works, and it makes a really fantastic quality organization where one of the qualities being manifested is a value of the people. And it also creates stability. If everything depends on the traditional hierarchical pyramid leader model, well, what happens if the leader is sick or gets pushed in front of a bus or has an accident or something like that? If the whole group is involved in those kind of decisions, then the group can just say, hey, we think that Michael should be the next chair of this group, or Brady can take over, or Elizabeth can take over that role. And what it means is that there's the people with that knowledge already there, prepared to take over seamlessly, if you like. So in a way, there is a bit of a hierarchy, but it all comes back to the bottom. It all comes back to the outside. It all comes back to the community. And but it's also starting to evolve different characteristics that act like organs of the body, where they do different things, and where, if we're going to pass the ball among each other as a team, then my job is to make a really good pass to Josh, and Josh's job then is to make a really good pass to Elizabeth to score the goal or whatever. So that's the organizational structure and the organizational flow that we could be adopting in our community. And structure's vital. We know the current system needs transition. We know the existing power structure is just enormously dysfunctional. The manifestations are hierarchy, command and control, bureaucracy, disempowerment. And when we look at a typical organisation, the British Civil Service, I think, has 338,000 employees and 12 levels of management or something like that. If we look at Toyota, which does employ a systems thinking model, then they have I think they've got over 300,000 employees and only 4 levels of management. Well, the only way you can do that is by sending as much responsibility as possible down through the organization. So I'm not saying that's ideal, and it's certainly not ideal for a community environment, but there's some interesting little insights that we can get by looking at these organizations and saying, how does that work? What's really going on there? Is there something that we can take and use from this? So, the aim is sovereignty, and that means empowering people. And effectively what this is a model for direct democracy, localization, effective support of local culture, custom, and practice. So I've mentioned Gore-Tex. There's a few others that I could pitch in, but there's, it's not really on topic to go much with the corporate world, I don't think. But the vision is what the commercial people call key performance indicators. We can scope out, in an ideal world, the things that are most important to us. Now we're in a position to say, well, here's where we are. That's where we want to go. What are all the various elements that need to come into play, and in what order for us to actually manifest that? And then as we go, we just keep going with the conscious co-creation cycle, which is that we do it, and then we take in feedback, and we all talk among each other. Michael, what did you think of that? Elizabeth, have you got any thoughts about how we improve this, etc.? So excuse me, I think that's it. That's the basic intro into the conscious co-creation tools, and how they're designed to work, what they're designed to do, how they bring certain things to consciousness, and the fact that they're just tools, and we can evolve those tools as we go along as well. So anyone got any comments or questions or anything that they wish to share?
I just want to say I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm so grateful for your sharing. And thank you, Josh, for inviting me here. It's been a beautiful experience and such valuable wisdom shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I've got a great feeling of gratitude for you sharing that. Thank you.
Beautiful.
anyone got any questions or any more comments to share, or did that all make, did that make reasonable sense? I guess some feedback would be appreciated. More feedback. Yeah, thank you.
I was putting in the comments, scalability will allow us to work with our larger collective as a movement efficiently. I mean, without scalability, I've just experienced over and over these, kind of what you said in the very beginning. It's where it never gets started because we end up not having the feedback loop, not having even a loop. And this isn't with all the groups, different groups, but certain groups don't ever get started because they never focus on the co-creation part. It becomes one person driving it this way, and there's not even a set down to talk about how things are going to go together. I guess it's kind of like we said in the very beginning. You said some people are still coming from the pyramid model, and without dropping that, it's very difficult to even get any momentum, really, unless you're in the pyramid model, unless you're going to stick with that.
Yeah, and back to the ship. If that model is now a super tanker and it's already left port, it's much harder to turn it around once it's underway. And with regards to scalability, we're in a really exciting time. The potential now to bring in social software polling, for example, so people can take a vote. The ability to use some probably pretty simple tools for people to say, these are problems that I identify. Someone else saying, okay, I think the evidence is this, and someone else saying, okay, I think the hypotheses are this, and someone else saying, I think the solutions are these. And then the ability for that group to get together, maybe now an enormous group of people, hundreds of thousands or millions of people, to aggregate around the solutions and to work them and then build feedback and information into the model as well. Well, we tried that and it didn't work but maybe that's because we built it on sand or whatever, general situations, special situations. But the ability for that then to leverage the collective consciousness is enormous. And I think it's much more than even something like AI. Why? Because the world's greatest supercomputer is something that everyone who's on this call now possesses. And there's one here, and there's one here, and there's one down here as well. And if we can keep them in balance and harness them, then we've got something of infinite capacity, each of us. But the ability to share that and to share the consciousness and the wisdom on another level as well is fascinating, because the other thing is, we're dealing with all sorts of people in all sorts of situations, all sorts of experiences, and we need to find ways of bringing people into this who've not even thought of any of this yet, who may be completely and thoroughly plugged into the existing system, and what they need is the practical grounding and manifestation of models for them to go, wow, I've never heard of that before. That sounds brilliant. This kind of community sounds exciting. Having our own waste, our own food, our own energy, a building coated in a geopolymer that's straw bale that can last for 2,000 or 3,000 years, a crystal building effectively. There's all sorts of angles coming into this which can thoroughly excite people, no matter how grounded and practical and pragmatic they are, or how thoroughly visionary and creative there are. I think there's something for everyone in this kind of model, and that should be something that is we can use to inspire other people and make it simple for them to engage with.
Yeah, I also, it's like how I see it is, it's like we can build the ultimate, eco house, community, city, and we could be yelling at each other the whole time, and it could be So it's really cool what we're co-creating here is this, the other part of it, the part where we produce the energy, the hidden, the unseen, to match that.
Yeah, and here's where it all connects together. So let's say someone wants to just come to one of these communities to look at the energy or the food growing or something, and they walk away with an organizational model as well. This is where there's going to be so many levels of gifts that people can look at. It should be like walking into Santa's grotto, um, because there's no point throwing good technology, money, or anything else at poor organization, at organization that does not value people, that does not value the planet. um, and one of the other things is that organizations that are driven by short-termism and money actually don't make as much money as organizations that are driven by looking after the people, looking after the customers, looking after the people who look after the customers, organizations that are creative. And part of the hierarchical model is it absolutely grinds creativity and innovation out of those organizations. So yeah, there's all sorts of levels of gifts available here, I think.
I'm starting to see, I just got a new metaphor in my head as you were speaking. I'm starting to see the organizational model, and I've always been like, it's so important, organizational model. I'm starting to see it as the link between the unseen and the seen. I see that the furthest unseen part as just a culture. It's just culture. It's unseen. It's just there. It exists, but we can't really grab it. We can't define it. But it's a product of how we organize and all the things that happen as we talk and decide and make decisions and agreements and whatever else you want to call them, rules and laws. Um, Even rules and laws create a culture, even though they're a rigid structure that's forced. So I see those as the bridge to the physical world, to money, to buildings, to business, it's the bridge to the physical world, connected to the organizational structure.
Absolutely, Josh. And I think that all of this works on there's a dualistic level about it that we need to appreciate and quantum collapse into itself, basically. So one is back to the ship, using our intention to be able to navigate to a place that we can't actually see. That could be a long, long way away, and all sorts of unexpected stuff en route. And how do we calibrate on whether we're being blown off course or whatever? The other intentional angle is, we don't know really what it looks like when we get there, but we're setting our intention that the food should be absolutely fresh all year round, the absolute highest quality. Because how many people you folks all come from different places, but I'm in England, and I went to the supermarket today, and I saw the avocados. And we play a game called cricket over here, and it uses little hard round balls to play with, and these things are like cricket balls. And the thing is, if you buy an avocado and it's picked and it's not fresh and it's shipped for days or weeks on end, then the next thing that you get is something that literally rots overnight. And it makes me question not just what the flavor and the texture is, but what's the nutritional value of that. And imagine if we had the ability to grow an avocado here in England, or pomegranates or other things all year round. That'd probably be, in most people's experience, without doubt, the absolute freshest avocado they'd ever had in their life. And it might well be, in a lot of cases, the only fresh avocado they've ever had in their life. And let's imagine that we're putting a salad together where the tomatoes, the lettuce, the cucumber, the avocados, absolutely everything is absolutely fresh. It's been given energized water, energetic treatments, ultrafine rock minerals, all sorts of technologies put together in the most thoughtful, considered, conscious way to make the absolute best quality. and yeah, you know, there's all sorts of bonuses that we can get off this to share with people, as well as manifesting our own abundance, I think. So this is all exciting to me, and to me it's common sense. But the amazing thing to me is, you know, this hasn't been done before. How crazy is that?
And then we have to have a way that, you know, we make this amazing salad and then someone comes and puts store-bought salad dressing on it. We've got to have a way to like tip that person off. And
I think, well, you know, then putting a little corporate hat on this now, you know, if you're growing food like that in a community, then, you know, if you've not built one, the people are going to say, you know, why haven't you got your own eco cafe restaurant here? You know, I want to now experience the atmosphere of this building with its food, which is absolutely fresh, which someone has put some love into picking and creating and adding, you know, olive oil and balsamic vinegar and stuff like that to make a dressing. And there's added value coming in as well, because, you know, if these people are traveling for a long way to see the energy and the waste and the organization and all the rest of it, then, you know, they're going to be thirsty. They're going to want a nice cup of tea or coffee. They're going to want a nice meal as well. And, you know, if you're going to do that, then you might as well have somewhere to sell them the technologies and demonstrate the technologies and tell them about the building techniques and the building materials. And again, it's about, you know, what can I do to share with others? And again, it doesn't need to be entirely commercial. The more we do for free, the more we make available for free, we are reducing the barriers to entry to zero. And there's a network effect from this. If I'm the only guy in the world with a mobile phone, it's not worth much. If all of you have mobile phones, then we can all communicate with each other a little bit. But if there's billions of people out there with mobile phones, then that's the value of a network. So the value of the network in a community sense is for communities to be able to join together and to share as well. And, you know, my feeling is that the more you put out there for free, the more people will go, wow, okay, I can get it all off the net, but you know what? I want to go and meet these people. I want to go and hear them. I want to go and speak to them. I want to go and see who else is going to these kind of things. And, you know, this is really inverting a lot of the ways that the world and the organizational world and the corporate world especially works. And my feeling is that we have to do it this way anyway, because it's all holographic. And the more we share and the more we create capacity to bridge and interconnect, then the more it will bridge and interconnect, and the better it will be for everyone.
yeah, I think all that everything, you know, we've been talking about kind of ties into experience. It's like experiencing the salad, our experience of building the house, the experience of being on the ship. You know, is that in flow? Are we dropping people off the ship left and right? Are they saying, get me out of here? Or are they like, how do I put everything I have into this? Because this is amazing.
Well, that's the other aspect of manifestation of intention. So the first one was the boat, and now we've got the one which is us going, whoa, what does it feel like to be there? Let's put our gratitude into that and let it go and put it out to the universe to let it happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting because these structures, while they're not the funnest part of everything, they're super necessary in producing that experience. I mean, without it, you have chaos, and I've been in a couple of communities of chaoticness, not only is it not effective at all, it's like there's a difference between being on a call and it being all fun and energy, and then some people will sit on the call and go, like me, I'll sit on those calls and go, what are we talking about? Am I wasting my time? Why am I here? Like, it's fun, yeah, but why am I online to have fun? If I want fun, I'll go out here and sit at the beach, right? So, yeah. And then there's the other side of it where it gets so rigid and boring where people are looking at it. Some other people might view it and go, oh, they're falling asleep.
I think the other side of the manifestation is that everyone has an opportunity to engage with this, and I think that's a really key part of what we're talking about. So, I think it's all really exciting, but organizationally, I was going to say, the manifestation, in my experience, of poor organization, not having the right structure, not having processes that enable everyone to contribute, having an intention that constantly changes, is invariably personal and political. And if we can do this very consciously and be aware that there's a space for us and will be heard, then I think that most of that personal and political stuff just tends to sort of diffuse away. Yeah, so I think it's all part of the process.
I would think that if we're talking organizational structure, we're kind of like, it's like I said, it's kind of a bridge or a funnel from one area to the next, and there is a structure to it, and it's kind of like, to me, the agreement field is the body. So it's like, this is the boundaries which we work within. So, if it's outside of the value system, if it's producing plastic toys from China or oil fields and it's not in this realm, then it shouldn't be in the realm, right? So I see it as the scope of where it's like a room that we're in, or it can only fit so many people also. So if you shove a bunch of people in there, it's really defining what that space looks and feels like. So there's flows. People aren't butting into each other, and so that they are gone through a process, and the process is fun, and they're engaged and they're excited, and it's set up in the right way. I think a lot of people are pushing the button so fast, or maybe the purpose is just to make money, that the process gets lost, and maybe they don't understand they're shoving a bunch of people into a room that's not fun, and the experience gets lost. And so this is what I think that we're being mindful of as we work towards this together. And it's taken us all a long while. We've all worked on it for many years, and I think we're so close. We're there. Appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, does anyone else have any questions or comments? Because if not, then I think we've covered what we needed to cover this week.
All good. I'm complete.
Elizabeth, you okay? Anything? Do you have any comments or questions?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. I'm quietly sitting and listening, and I've been a little busy, so I haven't been able to track the whole conversation. And I'm not well rested at the moment either, so I'm a little slow on the punch. So I really appreciate everything. I've met Josh just one time, and I appreciated the quality of awareness that he brings to the whole conversation on intentional community. I feel like I'm sitting on a deep well of visionary material that has to do with how we're going to pull this off, not just organizationally, but more interpersonally. What is the foundation for how are we going to get along? And I've been slammed in some really unconscious and messy community experiences. And I have a lot of experience in community that's been beautiful and thriving. I'm also a strong alpha female, with strong leadership, strong voice, and a strong constitution, but I have some particular real wounding, and I can go sideways really easy around patriarchy and hierarchy, and I have just been really deeply hurt and gone sideways by some unconscious toxic masculine leadership. And so I'm working deeply on the two hands of knowing that I am a deeply tapped in visionary leader. And on the second time, I'm also a wounded female. At a time when there's all this gender alchemy conversation going on, and how are we going to actually bring the feminine up into the conversation where our leadership is actually invited to the table, and we're not doing the same, what I call father knows best. Some dude's going to come in with agency or authority, and I'm tired of it. I'm a little over it. So for me, I'm slower to speak up and in because I am a little weary around all that. And again, I'm owning it as my own wounding. I'm owning it as something that I go sideways. I don't stand up to that toxic masculine so much. As a strong woman, it's surprising, but I'm more in some ways conflict avoidant now because I'm weary of it. It's been going a long time, and all I can do is process my own internal material around that, my own wounding, my own, how it is that I go sideways in the face of that old patriarchal hierarchy models. And my experience is some people are just really not owning their stuff. So for me, to get into what I feel is really important is like, how do we create those structures where we can really, really foster emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, such that our circles are deep and real, that we can be embodied, we can be spiritually and emotionally present with each other in a way where it's getting fruitful through that, not just sitting around talking about it and then still falling into the same little ruts of power trips or gender dynamics. So, I come both with a lot of friggin' power, to play in the game and my own hesitation, and I love the wisdom you're bringing. And like, I want to be honest, I've been a little busy because I'm on a deadline and I'm not rested. So I haven't tracked everything in the conversation. So this may be a little redundant, and I'm really interested in organizational models and the foundational pieces. And I was almost going to draw up a document, but I'm working on something called the Blueprint for a New Humanity. And to me, that's kind of my visionary download of how it is that we're going to structure the ways that we're going to circle, we're going to counsel, we're going to relate. So that's kind of what I'm brewing up right now. It could be a book, it could be a manual, but I feel like it's a big contribution. I've been to the Tribalized Gathering a couple times. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I want to just kind of do my part, and my part kind of has to do with the download around the blueprints for a new humanity. Who are we, and how are we going to step into new ways of being together that work, that create community, and yeah. So that's it. That's a little long-winded for being quiet here on the sidelines.
Wow, that was so powerful. Thank you, and very, very beautifully and eloquently put as well. So I'm very, very grateful for your feedback on that, Elizabeth. I pity the fool who tries to be patriarchal with you, because what blindness. But this is this is another thing that comes from these tools, which is this. Here am I. Okay, I've got my glasses on, but I think I can see perfectly. But we know we've got a blind spot now, and we compensate for it. And in exactly the same way, this is the way that I can't see my blind spot. But I'll tell you what, you and Josh and Michael and Brady will be able to observe it for me much better than I can. And this is where, if we work together, we can really value the gifts and the experience that we all have. So thank you for that. It was absolutely bang on.
Thank you.
Brady, do you have anything you want to chip in as well?
No, I think everything sounds good. I've had to be a little bit in and out. I've just had someone arrive to my house that was visiting, and so he just arrived from Nicaragua and had to give him some stuff. So I've been a little bit in and out, but I've been really enjoying everything that you've been saying, and really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Okay, in that case, Michael, if you've got anything else to say, then please do so. But it's been an absolute pleasure to meet all of you. So, and if not, then I think we're done for this week. So, Michael, Josh, anything more to chip in?
Perfect. Thank you.
think we're done then.
Complete. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. See you guys next week.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Have a great rest of the day, everyone.